Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Crypto News Podcast. We are buzzing as always, and I'm super pumped for today's episode. We got one of the Bitcoin GOATs on the show today. Joe Burnett coming in hot, Director of Market Research at Unchained, a leading Bitcoin financial services company founded in 2016. At Unchained, Joe drives research and market analysis efforts, delivering insights into the Bitcoin movement indicators, market trends, and evolving needs of Unchained's client base. And this is a wide array of clients, from individual holders to large institutions. He's also the host, a fellow podcast host of the Bitcoin Frontier podcast, as he leads expert discussions surrounding bridging the gap between Bitcoin adoption and financial markets to audiences worldwide. Before Unchained, he served as product manager and head analyst at Blockware Solutions, and also worked for a couple regular TradFi and Trad consulting companies. Super pumped to get into this, Joe. Welcome to the show, my friend. How you doing this lovely afternoon?
Awesome. Doing great, Matt. Thanks for having me on the show.
Pumped to have you on. You're a pod guest, or you're a pod host rather, so I always appreciate the sick setup. My camera is on the fritz right now. That's why I'm using the MacBook camera, but you have an elite setup, and I love that. And you're rocking the TradFi Patagucci vest too.
Exactly. Yeah, no, our video editor has me set up in my camera and my mic, hopefully pretty good. So he'll be happy to hear the compliment.
Yeah, it's dialed in. Speaking of your setup, I love the orange tie. For all the listeners, you guys, again, if you don't follow Joe on Twitter or X, do go follow him. That's where I get a lot of my Bitcoin stuff from. You always have, I feel like every video, you're never rocking what you're rocking right now. You're always in the nice, crisp, clean suit with the orange tie for, of course, Bitcoin. Is there a funny story behind that, or were you just one day like, screw it, I'm gonna be the orange tie guy from now on?
Yeah, you have Michael Saylor, who typically is one of the guys that goes out there and wears the orange tie. And I generally think that like Bitcoin is still so new and so early that older people that might work on Wall Street and wear ties to work, or work wherever and wear ties, they're slow to get Bitcoin because it's such a paradigm shift in how the entire financial system works. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's a good look for the Bitcoin space broadly, just to try to bring like more professionalism into the space. But yeah, no, it's also just copying Saylor and trying to be a little funny.
Yeah, I love that. It is crazy especially at crypto conferences. Like even myself, like when I was in TradFi before, I mean, even this like 2-day beard I have going, my old boss, like if I rolled in the office and I was hungover or whatever, he'd literally hand me a razor. And I'd have to go to the washroom and like shave, suit and tie every single day. And here I'm just like Lululemon head to toe pretty much every single day. It's crazy. And then you go to crypto conferences, we got Consensus coming up. I mean, as we record, we have Token on. Guys are in like sweats and hoodies. Like, you know what I mean? It's wild, eh? Like just a different world we live in. First thing I'd love to get into is in one of the trendier topics. And this is something that I literally didn't know about. And I was researching this, and no one really had a good synopsis about Michael Saylor just buying Bitcoin in billion dollar clips week after week. And he's not moving the market. It really just doesn't make sense. You released a great video about this a couple days ago, and this is a great way to start the show off. Joe, why the hell is the market not ripping when Saylor continues to buy in billion-dollar clips? Mind you, this is OTC above market rate as well.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I've seen so many people ask that question, and I've had thoughts on it myself. Like, how is this possible that someone is able to literally accumulate billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, and over that period of which he says that he did that, the price might be flat or down even potentially?
It's wild.
A few thoughts that I have, just generally speaking. One is, you have to look back over the last 3 years or so, and throughout every Bitcoin bull market. 3 years ago, Bitcoin was $16,000 per coin. Today, it's $96,000 per coin. So that's a pretty material movement, especially if you compare it towards like traditional assets. And one of the metrics that I like to look at to just analyze what's happening in the Bitcoin market in general is HODL waves, which kind of track the movement of coins on chain. And so every Bitcoin bull market that occurs, you can kind of see that older coins begin moving, long-term holders begin selling. There's more coins that start moving like within the most recent month. And so that's just what happens is, during these parabolic bull markets, old holders do sell, and the buyers of those Bitcoins are people like Strategy, the new ETFs, potentially nation states like El Salvador, or other institutions that are accumulating Bitcoin, or of course also just individual people that are accumulating Bitcoin. So that's like one reason of why, just naturally Saylor can buy billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin and the price may not move. A new kind of theory that I've just kind of put out there somewhat recently is the idea that MicroStrategy is a Bitcoin substitute to some extent. And so an example or analogy that I've used is, if you buy a Bitcoin on Coinbase and then you send it to Kraken and then you sell that Bitcoin on Kraken, what does that do to the price? Well, really, it does nothing. It's kind of like a net neutral trade because you're buying it and then you're selling it. And so in a way, when MicroStrategy or now Strategy issues new equity, it's kind of like selling a Bitcoin or selling shares of MicroStrategy,
Interesting.
which is kind of a Bitcoin
Yeah,
proxy.
it is.
And then they use that cash to go buy Bitcoin. And so it's like you're creating a Bitcoin IOU via new shares of
Publicly traded
MicroStrategy
company. Yeah.
and then, buying Bitcoin. So it's almost like selling, a Bitcoin on Kraken and then buying it on Coinbase. It's like it's kind of a net neutral trade. So obviously that's not a perfect analogy by any means because MicroStrategy is an operating company. It's not actually, you can't redeem your Bitcoin from MicroStrategy.
Yeah.
You have to sell your shares.
Makes sense though. Makes sense.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
that's the general idea. One of the ways I was thinking about it.
I've honestly never heard that before. That is sort of wild. So the more shares Saylor issues, technically the more Bitcoin gets diluted. And again, we can jump into the whole publicly traded Bitcoin aspect as well, but like, who was the famous Bitcoin influencer, Joe, a couple of months ago who said, hey, like one of the guys who has 8-9 figures of Bitcoin, he's like, I sold it all and just bought iBit. And do you know who I'm talking about?
No, I can't remember. I do kind of remember someone saying that though.
Yeah. Someone said something like that. And again, I don't own much Bitcoin at all, but if I was a Bitcoin whale, I'd be like, damn. And we'll get into the custody part later, but it's like, do I want to have, 10 different ledgers and treasures in different parts of the world with seed phrases split up, some on an exchange and some with MicroStrategy and iBit? Or do I just go all iBit? Do I go all you know what I mean? Like now, present day, even 2 years ago, you didn't really have these options. It was like you can store them cold or store them hot. Now there's so many different avenues of how do you choose where to get Bitcoin? It's a weird one.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And it's like you have iBit, you have MicroStrategy, you have like single signature self-custody. You also have multi-signature self-custody. So there's so many different options now, which I think overall is good. Yeah, generally speaking, I think Bitcoin is long-term savings technology. And so the easier it is to give people access to number go up technology or long-term savings technology, I think that's good for everyone.
Yeah, well said there. You had a great tweet a couple days ago about, and I'll just read the tweet verbatim here. Joe says, the bull market isn't over until MNAV multiples on Bitcoin Treasury companies hit 1 or lower, similar to how MicroStrategy MNAV approached 1 at the tail end of the 2021 bull market, and the GBTC premium turned negative at the spring 2021 peak. I absolutely love this as I got into the publicly traded game. I went pretty heavy in 2019, 2020. In Canada, we have something called an RSP, TFSA. It's like your version of a Roth IRA kind of thing where it's tax-free. So I'm like, okay, I could buy Bitcoin or I can just, lower how much money I was going to pay Trio at the time by, hammering a bunch of Bitcoin stocks. And that's when I really first learned about NAV, MNAV, and all those kinds of things. Fast forward to present day. Is it like, are we approaching spooky territory soon, or do you think that this is a bull market right now? And furthermore, tie that into like how good of a indicator MNAV is for these publicly traded companies that have Bitcoin and hodl Bitcoin on the balance sheet.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think like short term is so hard to tell, and it's really difficult to time tops in the market. I think
so tough.
I think generally speaking, it's a lot easier to time bottoms in the Bitcoin market, but tops are hard because Bitcoin can get quote unquote oversold from like a technical perspective, and it could get oversold for quite a while, and all of a sudden you're just soaring to parabolic, all-time highs. So at the moment, I definitely am leaning bullish. I think like right now you have you just had US equities, experience a pretty rough month for April. It recovered quite fast. But for example, looking at something like the VIX, it reached a high that was not seen since March 2020, which was
Yeah.
a low in Bitcoin and equities. And then even before that, the next high in the VIX was December 2008, which was, near the bottom
Wow.
of the great financial
Two
crisis.
bloodbaths.
Yeah, exactly. So like the volatility that the US stock market saw in April was extreme. And typically I think like whenever stocks and markets generally find a bottom, you kind of want to get on the fastest horse at that point. And to me, one of the fastest horse, or the fastest horse in my mind, is Bitcoin. And I think it will do decently well, especially if we see global liquidity expanding. On MNAV, it's an interesting topic of conversation, especially like with MicroStrategy and all the other Bitcoin treasury companies. When I thought about that tweet in particular, looking back at the 2021 bull market, MicroStrategy was pretty much trading at a positive MNAV above one
Yep.
that was a premium over the underlying Bitcoin. And so what that means is, if it's trading at 2x NAV, then that means each share of MicroStrategy, or $2 of MicroStrategy, holds $1 of Bitcoin.
Exactly.
And when that hits one or below one, then that means, $1 of MicroStrategy might contain less than $1 Bitcoin, or more than $1 Bitcoin, I should say. And so when the MNAV is positive, like MicroStrategy is today, Saylor has the incentive to issue new
Yeah.
shares of MicroStrategy and,
Unload the
and buy
clip.
Bitcoin, which is
Yeah.
exactly what he's doing. But if we go into an extended bear market and the market cools down, or potentially other reasons, the MNAV could theoretically drop below one. And then Saylor doesn't have that quote unquote arbitrage opportunity anymore, where he can sell shares and buy Bitcoin
Yeah.
and create what he calls BTC yield, which is just increasing
Yeah.
the Bitcoin per share for every shareholder. So I think MNAV is like an important metric to look at when you're evaluating Bitcoin treasury companies. But I also think that it could be a sign of showing like when the market is really starting to cool off and when we could be in another, on the start of another bear market potentially.
Yeah. Super well said there. The whole publicly traded Bitcoin space, Joe, is so interesting. And like I get why every company doesn't put it on their balance sheet, but on the same time, it's like the stock market's a game. Like life's just a big game made up of many smaller mini games. And like all these big dogs, like they must surely know that if they all sort of round together and all buy Bitcoin at the same time, like there's no way it won't rip. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and again, obviously you and I are very biased. We're two huge Bitcoin guys. Like, we friggin' love the orange, magical pill / coin. But I just don't get it. Like, why not do it? Like, there's so much that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, and I get the neg points. I get the rebuttals. I get why people would rebut it. But it just, I don't know. Like, how do you feel about that? Like, why the hell aren't these guys going all in right now?
As far as other corporations,
It's such a no-brainer. Like if you're sitting on, billions or hundreds of millions or even millions in cash, like even the marketing push alone. Like I just had Michael Moe from Cooler on the pod last week. The episode actually aired today. By the time this episode airs, it'll be a week later. But nonetheless, like I think I've heard of his company once, and they're all over the news right now because they bought 668 Bitcoin. Like even just the couple mil you spend, it's got to be worth, a couple percent of that just in the marketing push alone.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I completely agree that if you're a smaller company that's publicly traded and struggling, or you're, what Saylor and like Eric Simler have termed zombie companies, and
Yeah.
you're kind of running out of options and you're not growing, Bitcoin makes perfect sense. You're kind of looking for an alternative, and your business is failing or just at least not growing, and it makes perfect sense to adopt Bitcoin. I think like when you look at, something like the Mag 7, where they're, highly profitable tech companies that are trading for potentially trillions of dollars in market cap.
They don't
Like
need to.
they
Yeah.
have good businesses
Yeah.
that are profitable and then are growing. And so they don't necessarily have a need to know at the moment, but perhaps maybe maybe at some point a new competitor comes in their space, or AI happens to disrupt themselves, and they, all of a sudden have a lot of cash or a lack of growth, and they don't necessarily know like how to allocate the capital going forward that they have remaining. And then at that point, maybe it makes sense like, hey, let's just start holding Bitcoin because it's going to perform better than anything else
Yeah.
we know of at the moment because our business isn't doing as well as we thought.
Yeah. No, that's wild. The 10 million Bitcoin valuation. This is something I gotta bring up. This is probably the only point where you and I don't agree on. And I know, I mean, again, I was lurking your Twitter before the show. I lurk every guest Twitter before the show. It's where I'm going to get the most alpha on them. I literally saw you repost the Hal Finney email from like, God, 15 years ago, which is wild to even think about, when he was like, this could go to 10 million per Bitcoin based on XYZ, and we can get into the reasons. But why do you think it could hit 10 million, and what needs to happen for it to hit 10 million?
Yeah. So a few thoughts on this. One of the most simplest ways that I like to think of Bitcoin is it's digital gold. And if you look at the market size of gold, you'll see it's about a $21 trillion asset.
Yeah.
If Bitcoin is digital gold, then I think at the very least, it could reach gold parity. On top of that, I think that Bitcoin is not just digital gold. I think Bitcoin's superior than digital gold. So if you look back at something like the Alexander Graham Bell's telephone, right? Is Apple the same size as the original telephone company? No, it's magnitudes or multiples larger. Look back at the largest, horse and buggy company. Is Tesla the same size as the largest horse and buggy company? No, it's magnitudes and multiples larger. And so I think when you look at Bitcoin and you compare it to gold, the old, digital gold, and you can compare it to the archaic version of gold, well, Bitcoin is more scarce and it's portable over the internet. So it has two unique properties that are vastly superior to gold, which in that case, maybe we do see it, Bitcoin being potentially 10x better than gold. And if that's the case, well, you have the 10x just to reach gold parity, which puts Bitcoin at $1 million per coin. And then on top of that, if Bitcoin is 10x better than gold at preserving wealth over time, then maybe Bitcoin does another 10x on top of that and reaches the $10 million per coin. So I definitely think that it could take quite some time, but I do think that it's, probably going to happen. It's just a matter of, how long your time preference is.
Okay, so let's double click and take a step back here. So if that happens, like, and I like to use my normie friends, because I'd say the pod is definitely not probably, it's 75% crypto folks, 25% normies who want to reach out and listen, because Crypto News has a very generic domain. That's one of the best strengths about Crypto News, and we get a lot of normies who want to learn about crypto. And Bitcoin people know about, but the one thing I always get about Bitcoin is like, everyone thinks it's too late, because they look at the price and they hear these stories where it's like, oh, I could have bought Doge at not 0.0000 whatever cents, and 10 bagged or 30 bagged, 40 bagged, or 1,000 bagged on all these shit coins that get launched every day. They hear Bitcoin trading at 95K and they're like, all right, well, for me to 10 bag that, it's $1 million a coin. How the hell am I going to do that? And again, you're way more in the Bitcoin space than I am, but what do you say to folks when they're like, well, I'm not going to get the return and it's already risky as is, so they don't even get interested about it? That's sort of the main commonality that I find, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that a lot of quote unquote normal people fall for that basically effectively unit bias, right? Like
exactly.
They see that the price of a quote unquote single Bitcoin is $96,000 or whatever it happens to be. And they're like, wow, I can buy this other crypto token, and they probably equate it to being somewhat similar to Bitcoin in their head.
Bingo.
At least.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, this thing trades for less than 1 cent. It could easily go to 10 cents. Yet Bitcoin, how is that going to go to $1 million? And so in their mind, they think it's more likely for the token to go to 10 cents than Bitcoin to go to $1 million. And I think that's just like the wrong way to look at it, right? Like Bitcoin is infinitely divisible. Crypto tokens could be, the unit bias could be changed if it wanted to be. Like, you really want to look at, I guess, the market cap of these things, but Bitcoin itself is basically infinitely divisible. On the main chain, it's can be divided into 100 million Satoshis. So if you just look at Bitcoin priced in Satoshis, which could be like dollars and cents, well, Satoshi is 1 cent or less than 1 cent, whatever the math would work out to be. So I think that that's just kind of a flawed way to think about what Bitcoin is. A better way to think about it is the market cap of Bitcoin and how, the total size of the entire Bitcoin market, compare that to the total size of the gold market. use those relative valuations to figure out, okay, if Bitcoin reaches gold or becomes superior to gold, then that's how you could say like, okay, well, Bitcoin could hit $1 million per coin at gold parity or $10 million per coin if it happens to be 10x better than gold.
I completely agree with you. It's just, as you said, like it's a flawed decision or decision making process. I agree with you, but like humans are hella flawed. Like we are walking flaws, and going to the grocery store and being like, okay, how much would this apple and this box of milk cost in Bitcoin? It's like, you know what I mean? That's when it gets a little wishy-washy. That's, for me, that's like, and again, for us, it's totally, it's a no-brainer. It's a non-issue. But when I think of my normie friends, that's such a
Yeah.
tough one.
And it's a really good point. Like another thing that I've thought about recently is like the ETFs and Bitcoin Treasury companies are kind of quote unquote fixing this in a way. Like, well, one, I guess like for normies that really fall for this, they probably don't have much capital anyways to move the
Exactly.
price of Bitcoin that much. Like the
Exactly.
people that are going to move the price of Bitcoin are like large institutions or
Yeah.
central banks or governments that effectively have a money printer. But I do want more normies to have exposure to Bitcoin, and they'll see something like the Bitcoin ETF, or
Yeah.
an exchange could begin pricing Bitcoin in Sats, for example, and they're like, oh yeah, that the unit bias looks a lot better for buying Sats or whatnot, or Bitcoin treasury companies, like MicroStrategy in the past has done splits where they did like a 10-for-1
Yeah.
stock split, making their shares cheaper.
Yeah.
And some people are like, oh, well, I'll buy MicroStrategy. And like I mentioned earlier, it's not directly a Bitcoin IOU, but it is kind of a Bitcoin proxy. And you're going to get similar performance to holding spot Bitcoin with a little bit of leverage. And so I think that people will get Bitcoin exposure via other ways if they're slow to actually adopt, real physical Bitcoin.
Yeah, 100%. Joe, you're on a roll here. We're going to take a quick break, give a huge shout out to our sponsor of the show, Prime XPT. And when we get back, we're going to take a deep dive into Unchained, and we are going to jump into custody. Can't wait to get into those two things. Huge shout out to Prime XPT, longtime friends and longtime sponsors of the Crypto News podcast. We love the team at Prime XPT, as they offer a robust trading system for both beginners and professional traders. Doesn't matter if you're a rookie or a vet, you can easily design and customize your layouts and widgets to best fit your trading style. Prime XPT is also running an exclusive promo for listeners of the Crypto News podcast. Use the promo code CryptoNews50 to receive 50% of that deposit credited to your trading account. Again, CryptoNews50 to receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. Now back to the show with Joe. Joe, your fellow podcaster, before we get into it, I always find when I have an ad read, I just like rip through them. I don't know if you're like the same way, but I'm always like, when I already speak quick, and I think it's because I listen to so many podcasts on 1.5 or 2x speed. So I think I just have the like drilled into me. And then when I have an ad read that I've done so many times, it's just like, what do you think? Was that too quick or?
No, I thought you did a great job there.
Just a fellow nice podcaster. I love it. Okay, let's jump into Unchained here. You guys have so many incredible products. Really, your bread and butter is you just help people with their Bitcoin. Pretty much, like, to my knowledge, full suite. Doesn't matter what they need. You guys are just a Bitcoin helping company. You also have and the team work on your wealth is melting report, which is incredible as well. But give us the elevator pitch on what you guys do, and then we'll get into the fun stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So Unchained is a Bitcoin company. We currently help secure a little over $10 billion worth of Bitcoin. And we do that via collaborative custody. So if you think about how can you buy and hold Bitcoin today, you have a number of options, like kind of like we talked about. You have MicroStrategy, but if you're talking about like more of a direct IOU for Bitcoin, you could buy the Bitcoin ETFs. You could buy it on Coinbase or another exchange, or you can hold it in a signature hardware wallet. And so those are three options. iBit is interesting, and I think all three are good options, especially if you're just getting into Bitcoin and getting started. But once you have obtained a significant amount of Bitcoin, there's perhaps a better solution, which I think is Unchained. And the way I like to think about it is like, okay, if you buy iBit and you have $1 million worth of Bitcoin in iBit, at the end of the day, you're trusting BlackRock, who's then trusting on Coinbase to make sure that they don't lose the Bitcoin, or that BlackRock gives you permission to sell your shares or not lose the Bitcoin via Coinbase. And also you have Coinbase, who Coinbase custody is somewhat of a black box as to how it actually works behind the scenes. How do you know
Spooky.
that
Dude,
North
that's
Carolina? Yeah,
sorry to cut you off, but that is like when we talk about potential black swan events to bring the whole house down, like that is spooky town 101.
exactly. Yeah, and it's not like that stuff like that has not happened before in the space. You've had Mt. Gox, which was one of the first large Bitcoin exchanges, got hacked and lost a lot of Bitcoin. You had, schemes like BlockFi and FTX,
Yeah.
which were either, negligent or outright frauds in what they did with clients' Bitcoin. And so if you have your Bitcoin at an exchange or an ETF, that may be fine for a little while, but at the end of the day, you don't have the Bitcoin. You have an IOU for Bitcoin. And one of the cool things about Bitcoin compared to all other traditional assets is you're able to take physical self-custody possession of that asset. Unlike stocks, where you're effectively relying on a management team to continue executing and a brokerage account to make sure that they actually hold the shares for you on your behalf, or bonds, which is effectively loaning money
Yeah.
out to other corporations, all a bunch of counterparty risk. And so Bitcoin is a unique asset to where you can hold it without actually counterparty risk. Very similar to holding a physical gold bar in your hand. You're not trusting anyone to make sure that you retain custody of the asset. And so again, one of the other options when you want to take self custody of your Bitcoin or want to eliminate Coinbase or whatever exchange as a single point of failure, you might get a single hardware wallet and you might put all of your Bitcoin on that. But again, if you have a significant amount of Bitcoin, whatever that might be to you, you don't necessarily want a seed phrase to $1 million just laying around your house somewhere. Like that's a potentially a physical security threat to your Bitcoin. Just like you wouldn't keep, $1 million of cash,
Under your
under
bed.
your mattress
Yeah.
or whatnot. It's not a great idea. It could be dangerous, especially depending on like where you live. And so what Unchained does is our default quote unquote vault product is multi-sig, which basically just means you have multiple keys protecting your Bitcoin. And the default vault setup is the client holds two keys and then Unchained holds one key. And you need two keys to sign a transaction and move Bitcoin out of your vault. And so what you can do is you can have one key at X location,
Yeah.
another key at Y location, and then Unchained holds the backup key if you ever need help. And so if you happen to lose one of your keys or a hardware wallet becomes compromised or one of your keys or seeds become stolen, you don't lose all of your Bitcoin because you don't have a single key
Bingo.
as a single point of failure for your Bitcoin. And so in my opinion, it's one of the best ways to eliminate any single point of failure from your Bitcoin and ensure that you can actually hold on to your Bitcoin for a significant amount of time and perhaps even for generations to come.
Yeah, well said there. And this is on me. I should have done more research. But for the whales listening to the pod or for the institutions, anyone who has, 6, 7 figs in Bitcoin and wants to get involved with Unchained, walk me through the fees, the onboarding process. I'm sure it's super simple. You just let everyone know how secure it is and how world-class and professional it is. But like, what do you guys charge? Because I'm sure people are wondering like, hey, if I'm going to have Joe and the team secure my Bitcoin, like what are they snagging from me?
Yeah, absolutely. So the default vault product is $250 a year. We have our signature.
That's so cheap, man.
Yeah,
That's such good value.
for sure. And you can literally secure billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin if you want to do that through using Unchained. That's the main fee when you're just setting up a basic vault. Another cool feature that we have within Unchained is you can buy and sell Bitcoin directly to cold storage. So if you have X Bitcoin in your vault and you're like,
Elite.
I don't want to trust, sending my Bitcoin to some random exchange, hoping that they receive the Bitcoin and then they, enable me to sell once it's on the exchange and then enable me to click sell. And then hopefully I get a wire transfer at some point if I ever need, dollars from the Bitcoin. Whereas Unchained, you can actually just sell the Bitcoin directly from your vault. You just send the Bitcoin to Unchained in the Unchained platform, and then Unchained will just send you a wire transfer directly to your bank account. And it works the other way. So if you
Delete.
have dollars in your bank account and you're like, I don't want to, buy a Bitcoin on Coinbase and then send that Bitcoin to my cold storage, I'd rather just buy it from Unchained and then have Unchained directly send that Bitcoin to my cold storage. Well, Unchained can enable you to do that too. So it's a pretty cool setup to where you don't have to trust a crypto exchange that, you may not want to trust.
Yeah. This is a bit of a weird one. And we can just, I mean, we're getting a little tight for time, so we can rapid fire through these. But at what point do you think it's time? And again, this is such almost a shitty question on mine because it's so subjective. And I have this conversation with friends who, they got in a couple of years ago, started, just like you said, back in 2022, Bitcoin was what, 16K, right? And my friends who listened and put a couple grand in, that's now worth 10K. And they're like, okay, this is good. And I always tell them, like, once you hit literally 5 figs, heck, even high 4 figs, get that off, get off exchanges right away. Like, no questions asked. What's your 2 cents on that? At what point should people be like, it's time to go, screw the exchanges?
Yeah, I mean, I think like when anyone's learning about Bitcoin and has accumulated a certain amount of Bitcoin, it's good to just experiment with the technology
Yeah.
and figure out how it works. Like, I think like once you've used a hardware wallet or even a software wallet, something on an iPhone where download something like Blue Wallet, you record your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, you send, $20 of Bitcoin to it if you want, and you can see it like, okay, this is actually what it means to have sovereign
To
complete
own it.
control over
Yes.
my wealth.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you could, download another app and load your seed phrase up into that only holds, $20 worth of Bitcoin. You delete the other app, and then you can see like, oh, well, wow, like my seed phrase is literally the key that controls my Bitcoin. So I'm not stuck on any particular software wallet. I can move to a different app or a different software wallet on a completely different device, and my Bitcoin is still there. I still have the keys to sign it as long as I wrote down or recorded, however I chose to do that, my 12 or 24 word seed phrase. And I think like once that kind of like clicks in your head that Bitcoin is really a physical bearer asset that is controlled by keys that you can have in one spot that you can geographically separate, then it starts to really click in your head like, wow, like this is a really powerful tool, and it's
100%.
almost unlike any other traditional asset that I hold in my portfolio today. So I think it just varies depending on how much you have. I think the moment you buy any amount of Bitcoin, it's worth it to like start playing around with different wallets and trying
I
to
agree.
figure out how it works from a technical perspective.
Yeah, well said there. I agree. For me, the most powerful was Tether. Like, I remember the first time I sent Tether to someone and received it, I was like, holy crap. Because like again with Bitcoin, it's a little different. You're looking at it more in the sats and the 0 point, not however many Bitcoin you have, not where Tether, it's just like straight dollars. I was like, so if I want to send this to a contractor in the Philippines or a virtual assistant or a dev or whoever in another country, like I'm in Canada, it's a shit show, right? I got to convert CAD to USD and send that USD. Then there's fees on every end. It's like, I can send Tether for a couple bucks. Are you kidding me? That's wild.
Yeah.
And to fortify your point, it's like if I walked into the bank and, Canada has 5 banks that are all huge. It's a big sort of monopoly, oligopoly kind of thing. But it's like, if I walk in, I'm like, hey, I want 100 grand. They probably don't even have 100 grand there for me. Like I'm going to have to go to the main branch and like go to the friggin' main vault. You know what I mean? It's like, even though you have 100 grand in the bank account, whereas with Bitcoin, I could literally fly to any country in the world and could bring millions of dollars with me. I don't have millions of dollars of Bitcoin, but I could if I did. It's just, it's something that's super powerful, which I absolutely love. Price predictions. I don't want to go to price predictions because again, I know you don't like those. I don't like those either. It's fun to talk about the potential 10 mil, but what point from, let's just say, what next point in the run up will be the most vicious? Like I'll never forget. I want to say it was like, I want to say it was September, October, November, December I think it was October, November 2021 when we went from like 30 to 69. I remember waking up in the morning, it was like Bitcoin up 5K. Bitcoin, I was like, holy shit. You know what I mean? It was electric. I couldn't stop putting my phone down. Do you think we're going to have another wild run up like that? And if so, at what point will it be at?
Yeah, I mean, I think the nature of Bitcoin is that it eventually happens time after time. I think it probably depends on who you are and how much wealth you have allocated to Bitcoin for you to get that type of kind of interesting feeling. But yeah, no, I mean, I think that like in my mind, this could play out over the next 12 months. This could also play out over the next 5 years.
Yeah.
I think that Bitcoin should reach gold parity at some point, which would be $1 million per Bitcoin. I think that's really just a matter of time. And like the capital exists, it's out there. It's able to be allocated to Bitcoin. I think the argument that Bitcoin is superior than gold is pretty clear, as long as more people that have significant amounts of capital understand the difference between gold, Bitcoin, and all other assets. And so I think it's really just a matter of time until we see $1 million Bitcoin. And maybe for me and other people, that might be a pretty crazy moment to reach $1 million Bitcoin. $100,000 Bitcoin was pretty cool too.
It was electric. I was in Argentina. I'll never forget it. Last question here. The great decoupling. Over the last couple of weeks, Joe, we've sort of had it. I mean, there were a couple days where TradFi was like down, high 1-digit ticks, down 5, 6, 7, 8%, absolute shit show. TradFi people losing their minds. And for us, it's like, oh, we're down 7%. Just another day at the office, baby.
Yeah.
A little volatility sounds good. Cash the check. But have we decoupled? Are we there yet? Like, I feel like these last couple of weeks were sort of like, okay, maybe this is a risk asset, but have we decoupled yet?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's kind of become a meme, I guess, at this point.
Yeah.
I think, what's promising to me, I guess, with the quote unquote decoupling, or just even looking at the last month in general, is like, you saw the VIX, like I said, spike to levels not seen since March 2020. And March 2020, Bitcoin literally fell like 50% in one day from, 6,000 something to 3,000 something, and quickly rebound after. And so like that was extreme volatility in Bitcoin, and it was definitely not decoupling. Bitcoin has done pretty well compared to the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ, despite the super extreme volatility. And like you said, like there have been one-off days here and there where S&P was down and Bitcoin was up. So to me, I think it's a bullish sign for Bitcoin going forward, that, the market is kind of can see Bitcoin in two ways. One, it can trade like NASDAQ when NASDAQ is ripping, and then two, it can trade more like gold when gold's ripping. And so if you get the best of both worlds with an asset like Bitcoin, then to me, it's an absolute no-brainer to have some pretty serious exposure.
Yeah, well said. Joe, what an episode. This was a blast, man. Hopefully we can meet in person and swing the sticks. If next time I'm in ATL, we'll definitely go out, man. You guys have some of the best tracks in the whole world in your backyard. So jealous. Have you ever been to Augusta, by the way?
I've been, but obviously I've never played there.
How electric was it in real life?
It's beautiful. Yeah, it's a great place.
Oh, I have goosebumps just thinking about it. Anyways, when Bitcoin's worth $1 million each, hopefully we can buy our way onto Augusta, but we'll see.
Exactly.
Still probably not. I mean, I think like Mark Cuban and Bill Gates tried to get a membership and they told him to fuck off. But anyways, we'll see. Joe, what an episode. Really appreciate you coming on. Before you go, can you please let our listeners know where they can find you personally and, of course, Unchained online and on socials?
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, thanks for having me on. This was awesome. We'll definitely have to tee it up one day. But yeah, you can find Unchained at unchained.com. And then you can find me if you just type in at III Capital on Twitter. That's my Twitter handle. Or you can just type in Joe Burnett Bitcoin on Twitter or YouTube, and I'll be right there.
Boom. Folks, what an episode with Joe Burnett, Director of Market Research at Unchained. What an epi. Two pretty big orange pill lads, but still, Joe is one of the Bitcoin OGs and just dropping knowledge bombs left, right, and center. We love to see that. Huge shout out to Joe and the team for making this happen. If you guys enjoyed this one, I hope you did. Please do subscribe. It would mean the world. To our whole team, speaking of the team, love you guys. Thank you so much for everything. And to the listeners, you guys are the best. Keep on growing those bags and keep on staying healthy, wealthy, and happy. And keep on stacking sats, of course. Love you guys, and we'll see you on the next one. Ciao.